Imagine a ship, a magnificent warship, armed and ready. Now consider this, the paper that built that ship, the promise to pay its sailors, and the debt incurred to launch it is the very foundation of the modern financial system you rely on today. That seems unbelievable, doesn't it? We assume government debt is a recent invention, a product of complex modern economies and spreadsheets. But the truth is far stranger. The towering national debts we debate today weren't born in sterile banking halls. They were forged on the bloody, tumultuous waves of the ocean. The paradox? For centuries, nations got richer by plunging themselves into massive debt, all in the name of naval dominance. You think you know how money works, but you're about to discover its true, salty origins.
This is Finance Beyond Seas. We explore the moments where the currents of maritime history and the tides of the global economy collide. We're here to navigate the wreckage of the past, to find the financial lessons that will protect you today. We analyze history and systems, not futures. Nothing presented here is financial advice. It is purely historical and economic commentary.
The context begins with a simple, brutal necessity: war. In the late 17th century, England was constantly locked in expensive, long-term conflicts with rival powers like France. These wars, particularly the ones at sea, were bankrupting the crown. Building and maintaining a fleet, a first-rate ship of the line could carry 100-plus guns and hundreds of men, required enormous, constant streams of cash. The old way, where the king begged for money from wealthy merchants or parliament every few months, was too slow, unreliable, and inefficient. The pivotal moment arrived around 1694. To fund the war against France, and specifically to pay the massive bills for the Royal Navy, the English government did something revolutionary. They created the Bank of England and issued long-term, transferable, and reliable government debt, what we now call consols or bonds. Prior to this, lending money to the crown was dangerous. If the king lost a war or simply died, the debt might be canceled. But these new bonds offered predictability. The new system guaranteed interest payments, backed not just by the king, but by the nation's future tax revenue, specifically excise duties, taxes on beer and other goods. Crucially, these new securities were liquid. They could be bought and sold on the market. The results were astonishing. Suddenly, regular people and wealthy nobles alike had a safe, reliable, and liquid asset to invest in, one that offered better returns than land or traditional businesses. Money flowed into the system, and that money flowed directly into the docks and shipyards. Between 1692 and 1815, Britain's national debt soared from 5% to over 200% of its GDP, almost all of it for war and the Navy. Yet this high debt period coincided with the first industrial revolution. The micro lesson: debt, when managed correctly and secured by a credible system of tax collection and rule of law, is not a burden. It's an engine for capital accumulation and national transformation. It allowed private capital to finance public power, ultimately making Britain the dominant global maritime and economic force for 2 centuries. The stability of the debt made the Navy possible. The Navy secured the trade routes generated the tax revenue to pay the interest. It was a self-reinforcing financial cycle born from the need for sea power. But it wasn't just England that tied its financial fate to the sea. In fact, the Spanish Empire provides a stark cautionary tale. While England innovated with paper debt, Spain relied on physical wealth, the massive silver fleets, the flota, sailing from the New World, laden with treasure from Potosí and Mexico. Spain's financing mechanism was dangerously simple. Use the future arrival of the silver fleet as collateral for loans from European bankers, particularly the Fuggers and Genoese. The crown was essentially borrowing against the ocean. This provided immense but entirely unpredictable wealth.
A single English privateer attack, a major storm, or a naval defeat could delay or sink the silver, wiping out the government's revenue stream and triggering an immediate crisis. From the 16th to the 17th century, Spain defaulted on its sovereign debt at least 14 times. The inability to guarantee the safe, continuous arrival of its maritime wealth and its failure to develop a reliable domestic debt market meant its financial system was perpetually fragile, despite possessing more silver than any other nation. The common theme: financial strength isn't about how much physical gold or silver you have. Spain proved that. It's about the credibility and liquidity of the system you build around it. The sea was the source of power for both, but one nation built a paper infrastructure strong enough to withstand the storms, while the other let its fate drift on the unpredictable currents of the Atlantic. Let's move to the 20th century, where the sea was used not just to create debt, but to enforce it. Following the rise of global commerce and the issuance of bonds to developing nations, an alarming pattern emerged: the Gunboat Hypothesis. This suggested that nations and private creditors used naval power to enforce debt contracts against defaulting nations. A famous, if controversial example occurred in 1902, when Britain, Germany, and Italy imposed a naval blockade on Venezuela. Venezuela had defaulted on its foreign debts to these European powers. The blockade was a clear, dramatic demonstration of force designed to compel payment. Soon after the intervention, Venezuela began striking deals with its bondholders and resumed meeting its obligations. Pattern clarification. The core theme here is that financial power and physical power are two sides of the same coin. Whether it was 17th century Britain guaranteeing its bonds with a strong navy, or 20th century Europe enforcing bonds with gunboats, the stability and enforcement of debt obligations, the trust that defines any modern financial system, was always, at its root, backed by a credible demonstration of power, often one projected across the ocean. Fast forward to today, and the seas still rule the financial world, albeit in subtler ways. We no longer see admirals issuing bonds directly, but the modern maritime reality is a clear echo of the past. Consider the global supply chain crisis and its financial impact. A single blockage, like the Ever Given in the Suez Canal in 2021, demonstrates how fragile our entire economic structure is. The flow of $9.6 billion worth of goods was halted every single day of the blockage. This wasn't a military or political crisis. It was a maritime choke point that instantly translated into inflation, inventory shortages, and financial stress across the globe. The same patterns of debt and power are repeating. Instead of building fleets to fight, nations are engaging in massive debt-fueled infrastructure projects to secure trade routes and ports. Think of global initiatives where one nation lends massive sums to smaller nations to build or modernize crucial ports, a modern echo of the old flota collateral, but with physical infrastructure replacing silver. If the debtor nation struggles to repay, the leverage is clear. Control over the strategic maritime asset, the port, is the ultimate collateral, effectively ensuring a form of financial control.
The pattern is clear. Maritime access is economic access. The colossal financial commitments nations make today, whether for secure digital infrastructure, undersea cables, sustainable shipping, or geopolitical positioning in key straits, are the 21st century equivalent of the 17th century naval budget. The financial stability of the major powers is still inextricably linked to the smooth, uninterrupted flow of goods and data across the sea. And those flows are, ultimately, backed by strategic decisions and vast sums of debt. What does this mean for you, the individual investor or consumer? When you see headlines about rising national debt, trade disputes, or shipping bottlenecks, you must see them through the historical lens of the Royal Fleet. It's not just abstract policy, it's a direct pressure point on your personal financial security. Your reliance on the stability of maritime commerce is total. The cost of your coffee, the availability of your phone, and the stability of your retirement fund are all predicated on the assumption that a container ship carrying millions of dollars in goods will safely and reliably cross an ocean using routes secured by global finance and strategic power. Concrete risk scenarios. Inflation shock. A major, prolonged interruption of a key maritime route like the Suez or Panama Canal instantly drives up shipping costs. This isn't absorbed by corporations. It's passed directly to you, eroding the purchasing power of your savings. Supply chain dependence. A sudden geopolitical shift that disrupts manufacturing hubs in Asia or Europe means the goods you rely on become scarce and expensive. Your local economy is hostage to distant, maritime-driven conflicts. Debt spillover. When a major economy defaults or faces a severe liquidity crisis, the global financial system, which finances all that shipping and trade, jolts. Your pension funds, which hold global bonds, feel the shockwave. The cost of being unprepared.
History shows that those who fail to recognize the fundamental link between naval power, maritime trade, and finance are often the ones left holding worthless paper when the tides turn. You must shift your perspective from purely local finance to global maritime economics. So how do you protect yourself from the volatility of these global maritime financial cycles? We learn a crucial lesson from the British financial revolution: diversification beyond paper assets and reliance on tangible foundational value. While the state needed liquid debt to fund its fleets, the individuals who weathered the worst storms held assets not entirely dependent on the solvency of any single government or the uninterrupted flow of global trade.
Tangible value, the new silver fleet. Historically, land, real estate, and precious metals like gold offered protection when government paper became questionable. These are tangible assets that do not require a ship to arrive safely to retain their value. They represent wealth stored outside the immediate liquidity pressures of the global debt system. Diversification of skills, the master craftsman. Just as the Royal Navy relied on skilled shipwrights and navigators, you need recession-proof skills. Invest in knowledge and abilities that are essential regardless of global supply chain health. Local services, high-demand technical expertise, and foundational trade skills. Your own ability to generate wealth is the most secure asset. Local resilience, the coastal community. The Spanish failed because they relied entirely on distant, fragile supply lines. Build resilience closer to home. Support local supply chains and diversify where you source essential goods. This reduces your financial vulnerability to distant maritime shocks. Cash flow, not just capital. Focus on secure, sustainable cash flow sources, much like the British Crown focused on predictable, long-term tax revenues to service its debt. Stable income streams offer a buffer against market volatility caused by global trade disruptions. By understanding that the ocean is both the greatest source of wealth and the greatest source of risk, you can structure your own portfolio to withstand the financial storms. There is always a window of opportunity for those who prepare. The story of the Royal Fleet and the birth of sovereign debt is a powerful metaphor. Our entire financial ecosystem is a massive ship sailing on a vast, unpredictable sea. The stability of the ship depends on two things: the ingenuity of the financial architecture, the bonds and banks, and the physical security of the routes, the Navy. History doesn't repeat itself, but the patterns always rhyme. The need for cash to secure power, the issuance of vast debt to finance that security, and the resulting vulnerability to the global currents. These patterns are eternal. Every time a debt crisis looms or a trade route is threatened, you are witnessing the ghost of the Royal Fleet demanding payment. The final truth is this: you cannot control the tides, but you can choose the resilience of your own vessel. Become a student of these cycles. Your knowledge of the past is your best navigational chart for the future. If this deep dive gave you a new perspective on where your money truly comes from and where it is vulnerable, then you've just found your financial compass. What historical pattern do you see repeating today? Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Finance Beyond Seas to navigate the hidden financial currents and master the history that dictates your future.